Wow, I don't know if it's just me, but that music was sounding extra funky today. So that is super fun. But I'm super happy to be here and joined by the amazing Marina Cohen and Lisa Schmid. We're super excited to talk all about Shadow Grave and all of Marina's books. And we'll also be taking your questions down in the chat. So get those questions in if you'd like to ask Marina about the writing process or Shadow Grave or her secret obsession with gingerbread. What? Maybe we'll come to that. But let's find out a little bit more about who we have. So Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Let's see. My name's Lisa. I'm the author of Ollie, Oxley, and the Ghost. That came out probably. Look at you, my friend. So that came out a few years ago, and I do have another book coming out in summer of 2024. I'm not allowed to talk about it, of course, but it is another middle grade ghost story. So hopefully there'll be some news before the end of the year that allows me to broadcast it and tell everyone. And I'm super excited about it. I love this story so much, but it is another ghost story, so staying on theme.
Well, and staying on theme with our favorite month of October too, which is super exciting. We have fall weather, all the pumpkins are out, so it's just really fun. And I'm Kim Ventrella, author of several books for middle grade readers as well, including that little baby right there, Skeleton Tree. That's my first one. But of course, we are really here to talk to Marina Cohen. So Marina, why don't you just give us a little bit about yourself? Maybe you want to tell us why you're so obsessed with gingerbread?
I'll open with gingerbread. I just love fall, and I love a lot of the fall comfort foods and the fall flavors. And I have no idea why, but I absolutely adore gingerbread. And I became quite obsessed with finding a variety of different recipes and finding the perfect recipe. And so I would try hard gingerbread and soft gingerbread, and I would use different kinds of molasses and different kinds of spices. And I think I've kind of locked into this amazing recipe, but it is really fiddly. It's like you melt the butter, you melt the molasses, and you have to be careful you don't actually turn it into candy, because that can happen too. And then you have to kind of put the flour in when it's hot and roll it out, and it just gets that sort of crispy but chewy. You can build houses. And I love the idea of, the cookie house. That's also, the good old dark German fairy tales that inspired me. And I can honestly tell you that if I were either Hansel or Gretel, I would for sure be in that oven, because I would my house for sure. Like candy, gingerbread.
That's like kind of what I'm wondering. Like, if you're making gingerbread houses, are they actually like haunted gingerbread houses instead of
nice.
Okay, so last year I did actually post this on my blog. I tried for the first time to create a haunted, but I left gingerbread behind because, I don't know why I came late to this party and discovered this so late. I've been eating Oreo cookies but I had no idea what made the Oreo cookie, so delicious and the dark sort of color. And I found out there is such a thing as black cocoa. And I went and bought a pile of this and baked it up and made a haunted house, cookie house. And that works really, really well, because you get that lovely, lovely haunted, beautiful color for your haunted house. So I did try the haunted cookie house, but I have to say it's not the same as gingerbread. My goal is one day when I, retire and have all kinds of time on my hands, to build one of those magnificent, amazing 3-story gingerbread houses, or something that sort of Maybe I should do like the Shining Hotel. What's that? The Overlook Hotel or something in gingerbread. That would be awesome. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think our pal Ira Marks would like that because he has a new graphic novel that is kind of an ode to the Overlook Hotel. So that would be perfect. But okay, well, let's dive into a little bit about Shadowgrave because this also features like a really spooky house and a spooky town, right? So why don't you just give us the lowdown on Shadowgrave?
So Shadowgrave tells the story of Arlo, 12-year-old Arlo, and his sister, who end up, I guess I should hold it up. Wait, let's grab one.
Yeah, we have to Vanna White this, right?
Arlo and his little sister Lola and their mother, who end up after a car accident, a little bit of a hair-raising moment, stranded. And they are sort of in the White Mountains, in the mountainous area in New Hampshire. And there is nothing along the path that they've just come, and they see a sort of dilapidated sign that says Livermore this way. And so they decide to head towards this town, hoping for comfort and a phone. Of course, their phones don't work. We always have to, smash a few phones, let a few batteries run low, Sometimes technology actually plays a significant role in a book, and you want it there, and it can help the creepiness, but sometimes it just gets in the way. So he has his phone, but it has lost its power. It's very low on power, let's just say. Not altogether, but they decide to head into this creepy town. And they're looking for help, and they don't find it. In fact, what they find is a town that has a deep, dark secret. And as I say, this town is willing to kill to keep this secret. So that's the town of Livermore, which, by the way, is actually a real life ghost town. So I set it in Livermore for a few reasons. One, I came across this town while I was partaking in my other favorite obsession, which is, gingerbread on one hand, and then researching real life ghost towns on the other. And I came across this town that actually existed at one point. And I believe if you still go looking for it, you might still find some of the foundations of the homes that existed. But it was an old logging community. And that was all fine. As you know, you come across wonderful gems in writing, but they don't really often turn into anything specific. But this one had a particularly dark part to its history that I came across. And it was almost a blurb that said, this may or may not have happened. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, it may or may not have happened. Like, how could you not notice if this horrible, horrific thing happened or didn't? But I decided to take that piece of the real town's history and just like run wild. So that's a little bit about it.
Very cool. I have to tell you that all your books are fabulous. All of them. Like, here's in the back.
My books are dropping.
But one of the things I think I always love about your stories, and you're so consistent with this, is there's always this brilliant twist at the end. And I pride myself on knowing what's going to happen or having a really good idea. And you really always surprise me. And that's, I think, one of the things that I love about your writing so much is that at the end, I'm always like, "Ooh, that was so good. I didn't see that coming." So kudos to you. And you did not disappoint with Shadowgrave. It's fabulous.
Thank you so much for saying that, because quite honestly, I love myself. I love a good twist at the end of a book. And so I really strive to create a book with things that people don't see coming. But of course, when you're writing, you think everything is like clear as crystal. And you're worried that, am I going to fool my readers? Am I going to fool at least some of my readers? Will anybody see this coming? And I try really hard to create that. And I guess one of the ways that I do that is I think I have two sort of things to say. One is that I've often asked people, do you know your ending? Do you know your ending when you start writing? And there are many, many people who say, I don't. I have no idea. The writing process is about me taking a character, putting the character in a situation, and basically seeing where it takes me. And they enjoy that writing, that part of the writing journey and process of discovery. So me, I need my ending. I need the ending. I don't have all the pieces along the way. And quite honestly, sometimes I am surprised at what comes along. But I need that ending in order to create the twist. Because if I know that ending, I can start placing the red herrings and everything along the way. So if I didn't know that, I feel like I would have to go back. And there have been times where I have changed that ultimate ending and then have to go back, and every clue that I've sort of placed along the way, I've had to change. The other thing that I will say about that is I think personally, mystery, which is interesting because your novel, Lisa, is a mystery, and it's a creepy one, and it's a mystery. But I think that mystery and horror have a lot in common. And what they have in common, in my opinion, is I once attended a workshop with a mystery writer, and the mystery writer said, I said, how do you do it? How do you write mystery? And she said, it's like you have two stories. So you have the real thing that's happened, but then you have the other story, which is the bits and pieces you're feeding to your readers along the way. And misdirecting them and everything. So she said, it's like you have these two, and it's only in the end that the reader sees it's been the same story all along. So
that's good.
I heard that years and years and years ago at a writing workshop on mystery. I just think that horror has a lot in common with mystery, and has a lot of mystery, like what's going on. Like, and similarly, I think even, again, in Skeleton Tree, it's similar in that what is really happening here, like, is it, and I think that's, yeah. So it really makes me happy to hear that the twists, that you've enjoyed the twist, that yay.
Yeah, no, you do it really well. So when I'm always raving about you on Twitter and saying I'm a fangirl, it's true. I love your stuff. And it's just so funny because I think I went on to grab a picture or something of one of your books, and I was in bookshop, and I was like, oh my God, I did not know that this it's Box of Bones. I didn't know that was out. I didn't know this was another book of yours, and I was giddy. And so I went ahead and placed an order for that. And so tonight I will be sitting down with my glass of wine.
Well,
my book and reading. So I'm super excited.
I definitely am excited to hear what you think of that one, and to see if you know what it's about from the beginning.
Well, usually messaging me when I'm reading your books and just being, like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see that coming. And so anyway, so looking forward to that.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I don't know what to say to that. I'm happy. I'm chuffed. I'm embarrassed, but I'm really, really happy that that you're enjoying them, because you both know this all too well. We sit in our little tiny world and we write things that we find, scary or amusing or hilarious. I recall writing my one humorous book, sitting at the table and laughing myself silly, and my husband saying, you do realize no one's going to find them funny. And I said, I don't know, but I'm loving it. I'm thinking it's terribly funny and witty. So, but we don't know. We never know how an audience is going to receive it. And that's always, a little bit of a worry too. Will the twists work? Will it be funny? Will it be scary? Will it be too scary? Will it be not scary enough? Because that's another fine line that we walk with horror. You'll have people who will say to you, that is too scary for middle grade. And then you'll have people who say, oh, that's not scary enough, right? Or, it wasn't scary. So, yeah.
Yes, I love it. Well, and so I'm thinking so many things, but one of them we were talking about this group of people that had this accident and go into this small town where none of the phones work and everything is a little strange and nobody's acting normal. And I'm feeling like I'm in a Twilight Zone episode. And then talking about the twist at the end. And those Twilight Zone episodes always had like a great twist at the end, right? That's kind of the thing they were known for. So I feel like this is bringing me back to my classic like Twilight Zone days right now. And I love that type of story. It's like, and of course, like they were mostly supernatural. So like when you're exploring the supernatural, I feel like this is kind of, we're always kind of riding in the Twilight Zone, right? With our glass of wine like Lisa and our box of bones and just seeing what happens.
And our gingerbread.
And our gingerbread haunted houses.
So it's funny that you say that, but I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. I love the Twilight Zone. And, the old black and white episodes that just, and it added that much to the atmosphere. And of course, like I go up and down the Tower of Terror at Disney, and every time that elevator opens, I hope that I'm entering the Twilight Zone. And quite honestly, Kim, it's funny, but I have had experiences in my life where, because of the Twilight Zone, I have asked myself, wait a minute, is it real? Have I entered the Twilight Zone? I'll tell you a story. I will share this story. And I like to share this story when I talk about this book, Mind Gap, that I wrote, but it was a long, long time ago. And I was living in Europe and the trains, everything worked like clockwork. So when a bus came, and said it was going to come at like 8:52. It came at 8:52. And when the train said it was going to leave at, 3:47, that's when it left. And it was one Sunday morning and I was working at the airport in Germany and it was a Sunday morning and no one was in the streets but me. It was 5 a.m. and the old cobblestone streets and I'm going like click, click, click with my heels. And I got on my bus and I ended up at the train station. And usually what came, I was outside and the platform was in the open and it was dark and it was very foggy. And normally what came out of that fog was like a type of a subway, like a silver kind of a modern train. And on that particular morning, I swear to you, out of the fog, barreling towards me, comes this giant, old, ancient locomotive bellowing steam, and it stops in front of me and these doors go open to this train and I'm looking at the clock and there's no one around to say, are you seeing this? Am I the only one seeing this? And I have this split second decision. Do I get on this train or do I not? If I don't get on this train, I'm going to be late for work. If I get on this train, I think I'm headed into the Twilight Zone. And honestly, that was what was going through my mind the entire time. Of course, I ended up where I was supposed to go. But it was a very freaky experience. And I've thought about it long and hard over the years. And I thought, what really happened that day? I just think that the real locomotive broke down, the train broke down. So they just grabbed an old one and started pulling this train with this old locomotive so that people wouldn't be late. But I ended up writing this short story called, are you ready? The Train. It's very creative. And, later, I turned it into a French play and it got an even better title. It was called Le Train. And then years later, I thought, okay, all right, I think I'm actually going to turn it into this like YA novel. So anyway, that was what turned into my Mind Gap. But the Twilight Zone, that's what goes through my mind all the time, like, is this really happening? Is that door, where does that door lead to? I want to go through that door. Maybe I'll end up in the Twilight Zone. So
yeah, that's so cool. That reminds me of that episode where the guy gets on like the train and it takes him back in time to his old small town and he's like deals with nostalgia over like his past life. Anyway, I feel like there's at least one, maybe multiple episodes where they get on a like train that takes them to the past or something. So that's so cool. I love it. It's a classic. And I feel like, so in this story, like you do what we do as like authors in any genre is you take some of these familiar elements, right? Like we have the people stranded in the creepy small town, and we have like the creepy house and stuff, but then you add like unique twists too. So of course we have characters that are dealing with real life issues at the same time that they're encountering the supernatural. And I don't know how much you want to talk about this like creature that they run into that like causes the accident, but you have a really unique like creature too. So talk about some of those other elements that are kind of twists on our expectations.
So I think at its heart, I often say this, and again, like I can bring both of your books into this as well, is that I think really horror is a genre that isn't often given, in my opinion, as much credit as it's due. And it's because, you know, there are is it a genre anyway? Because you could sort of break it down into, you know, all kinds of subgenres in horror. But really, good horror at its heart is still just simply a story of humanity, right? And it's a story about dealing with all kinds of things. And honestly, I could say the exact same thing about your books, your wonderful books here, is that it has heart. And so yes, I often say, is this really about the town? Is this really about a monster? Is this really about that? Or is it about ways that young people or anybody really can deal with really, really harsh things happening to them? And I think that that's sort of a theme in pretty much most of my books, actually. Like the in-between has a very, very dark, not great thing that has happened to this main character. And in The Doll's Eye, there's something very terrible too in this character's past. And without giving a box of bones away, I think I slipped something in there that no one has yet called me on. And I'm like, ooh, either nobody really got that line or two of what really happened to this character, or I don't know. I have no idea. But there's something very, very sad and very dark. And I think that also horror has a lot of sadness in it, because if you think about it, you know, we're dealing with ghosts in some cases. I mean, in Shadowgrave, it's not, but we're dealing with ghosts, and there's something inherently sad about that, because if you've got a ghost, you've got somebody who's passed away, right? So there's a lot to say about that. Now, in terms of the monster, I think that this is my only book. I'm thinking, I think it's really my only monster book where there is a monster, and it kind of came about sort of very organically as to what's happened to these people and why. But the only thing I guess I can say, I will certainly be blowing a lot here, but I did do a nonfiction book on deserts, and I was expected to find all these like extremophiles, right, that can live. And so I came across the tardigrade, and I don't even know if it's scientifically really considered an extremophile, but it can live like anywhere, anytime, the vacuum of space, on a volcano, in, you know, on the moon, in wherever, and just like this indestructible thing. And so, of course, you know, all these bits and pieces of like this real town of Livermore, this thing that's there. And the big, really most important thing I always say is why. When I write, I have to know why this character. So it can't just be any character. Like this story could not happen to anyone except Arlo and his mother and sister, because of who they are and what's going on in their lives. And that's the why. And I think if you take a story and you could throw any character in there, substitute it with any character, it's not a good horror story. I think if you're writing a story about something that has happened, if it happened to me, I would deal with it in a different way than yourself, Lisa, or you, Kim. But I think in paranormal, in horror, fantasy, it's particularly important to know, why is this happening to this character? Why is it their story and no one else's? And I think if you can answer that, you have a better story than just somebody running away from 10,000 zombies, right? I always tell kids, that's not scary to me. And they're like, what do you mean it's not scary? It's 10,000 zombies. And I'm like, running away from 10,000 zombies isn't scary. There's like there are way more scary things in life. And that's what I try to do. But yeah. So am I allowed to ask any questions here too?
Oh yeah. Are you going to put us in the hot seat now?
I am. I want to ask a couple of questions. So I'm going to ask Lisa. Lisa, again, when you wrote this book, it is definitely a creepy book. It's a ghost story for sure, but it's at its heart a mystery, right? It's a wonderful mystery too. And so what I want to know is, how do you craft your mystery? You notice I'm trying to head into the mystery area. So I keep asking, like, how do you craft your mystery? Like, what came to you first? Maybe plot, character?
Yeah. You know what? It's funny because you were talking about this earlier, and I always have the beginning and the end of a story. So I know where I'm going, but I don't know always how I'm going to get there. And I'm one of those, I don't plot at all. I literally write chapter by chapter and just hope that serendipity happens and I figure it out along the way. But I think it's just, I've just read so many mysteries, so many, I'm just a huge fan of cozy mysteries. And so to me, it's just, I think you just kind of, it gets into your system almost, like, inherently, like when you need to set a red herring, when you need to put an actual clue. And I loved your analogy about having those two layers. And that is exactly right, because sometimes you have to go back in and add, another layer to, if there hasn't been enough red herrings or enough clues. And it's funny, I just recently had to do an R&R for this book that's coming out. And she wasn't super happy with the ending of the story. And I thought, she wanted me to rewrite it. And I was just like, no, I'm not rewriting it. I love my ending, but it made me realize I hadn't set it up enough, like throughout the story. And so I went back in and added some clues and added some foreshadowing, and then she loved it. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, like, after you know where you're going, but when somebody else gets another set of eyes on it, there's just not enough. There's not enough clues where you think there might be, where you're just like, oh my gosh, you should totally be getting this. And there, so it's always good because sometimes there isn't enough. And so then you can go back in and layer them back in. So I always know where I'm going. And, I always start with, what's the mystery, or what does my character need to achieve? And then it goes from there.
And so you do like, you have that ending, right? And you're constantly sort of working towards that ending. Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm always like, things happen along the way. I was just, I'll just be like, ooh, I didn't see that coming. Yeah. I literally write chapter by chapter, have no idea how I'm going to get to the ending. And I kind of know how many pages I'm going to have per chapter. So I'm like, you need to fit your information in there. And then so that you can move on to the next one. So I'm just very, it's bit by bit, but knowing where I need to go.
That's amazing. And along those lines, where you took us, and this one here is such a wonderful, wonderful place, and such a surprising place too. And so my question to you is, such a cool concept. I don't think I'm blowing anything because it's like the first page or so, isn't it? Like where he finds the bone, right? So did you come up with that just like awesome premise first of somebody just finding that bone, or did you know where you were headed all along in this one?
I did not have any idea where it was headed, and it really was just that image that popped up in my head of looking down at the grass and seeing a skeleton finger bone sticking out of the grass. And
Creepy.
then, asking myself that question, okay, the most obvious thing to happen would be that it's a dead body. So what's the least obvious thing that would happen? And I thought, what if the bone started to twitch and it started to grow like it was a sprout instead of a skeleton finger? What would happen next? And so I knew the skeleton was going to grow in the main character's backyard, but I didn't know why or what was going to happen. And this was this was my first book that was published. So this was back in the day when I was just much freer and much more open to discovery writing. So I literally sat down every day, and I always tell kids I was writing in my dog's dog bed at the time because I didn't have a desk yet or an office chair or anything. So I sat in her dog bed. It was like the only comfy place to sit with my laptop. And every day I just answered that question a little bit more. And I was really surprised. Like, I thought this is going to be like super lighthearted, fun, like dancing skeleton type situation, and then it takes a curve that I didn't see, and it became like the first thing I wrote where I ever thought like this was actually like emotionally impactful for like me, and then I like for readers, like I felt like I had finally conveyed some like real emotion. That was the first time I had ever really done that in a book. Like I had done it a little bit in the book I'd written right before that, and thought was like maybe my most like successful thing to that point. Well, for sure my most successful thing to that point. But this one that I wrote right after, I was like, okay, I feel like, I finally like did that like well and like more fully fleshed out than I had the one before. So it was like a surprise. And I love when you can do that, when you can just like surprise yourself and it works out. Although I ended up doing so much revision on that book and like going back and layering in essentially the entire action story, because the story had the shape of like, okay, the skeleton grows gradually throughout the book and that kind of gives the story shape. And I had the emotional storyline set, but I didn't really have any other like action story that was like, moving things along. So I layered all that in later. But whenever you can write like that, like I love it. It makes it for the most fun, exciting process to me when you get to discover things along with readers. But I love that. So I love that you're like grilling us with questions too when we're supposed to be grilling at you. What? I love it. And just a reminder to people who are out there watching, we are taking your questions. So if you have a question, get it down in the comments and we'll be happy to answer it. And specifically for Marina too, or you can ask one of the whole group. But this is so much fun. And so I wanted to talk a little more too about your main character, Arlo in Shadowgrave, because we talked about like middle grade books, whether it's horror or fantasy or whatever genre, like there's always some kind of like real life issue that the kids are dealing with that like ties into this mystery. So Arlo is dealing with just a lot of fears and anxiety, and specifically like some fears related to his mother. So, I mean, do you want to talk about like how you kind of came up with his character? And, you mentioned, you talked about like, he's the only person that could star in this story, right? And that's so important. Like we have to know like why only this character could be the star. But how did you come up with Arlo?
So quite honestly, I was thinking that I needed a character for this specific plot. I needed a character who was dealing with a lot, who, as you said, was full of fear and full of anxiety. And the anxiety was a direct result of what was happening in his mother's life. So I think that sometimes it's easy to think about yourself and what's happening to you, but we often forget what's happening to the people around us as a result and how they are taking something in. And I'm trying so hard to say it without giving too much away. I mean, I could certainly, if I could give everything away, I think I'd be a little more eloquent here. But yeah, his mother's not well, and wasn't well, and he has been having to step up, and he's been sort of, she's quite an amazing person, and she's quite lighthearted, and how she sees life is, pretty amazing, to be able to look things head on and to still be cheerful. And he's not, though. He's having a hard time with this. One of the things that I often say is that I think happiness is a choice. I think happiness is a choice, and I'll say this, that in my personal life, I have known a lot of people who have had tremendous hardship in their lives, tremendous hardship, and have still chosen the path of looking at things on the bright side and being cheerful and enjoying, everything. And on the opposite side, I've known people who have not had as much hardship in their lives and have, seemingly anyway, a lot of amazing things happening and are miserable. So I think the idea is that you have to embrace life, that you have to look on the bright side, but at the same time, that's not always hard. And even though his mother is making that choice and his mother is feeling this way, she's not necessarily understanding how everything that she's going through has impacted Arlo. So, and where did that come from? Well, it did come from a personal experience. But again, I think if I say it, I'd be giving a lot away. But, I did, have someone, that was ill in my life, and it, as hard as it was on it was a dear aunt, and as hard as this all was on my aunt, it was very hard on me, because I love her so much. I loved her, and it was hard. So when you love someone, you're affected. And so I guess I wanted to look at a case of I guess a character feeling anxious, but not necessarily for themselves, but for someone else. I hope that makes sense, and I hope I didn't give too much away.
No, and it just goes to show how much our own, like every author's life experiences play into the stories they tell. And that's what I think, you tapped into that, and it makes the story and the character feel so authentic. And that's, whenever I'm reading stories like this, I always think, somewhere in their life, something has happened that's similar to this, and especially you bring so much heart to your characters. You can, it does not surprise me that this is something that you tapped into a personal experience. And so, and I think all of us as, middle grade writers we're all 12 years old at heart anyway. So it's easy to go back there.
So it is really funny that you say that, because, I was once told this by a friend, a fellow author, that, authors tend to be sort of in their minds stuck in the area, the age group that they write for. So, of course, the three of us are all, 12. And the funniest part is that, some people have often said, like, oh, Twitter's such a mean space. Why is it such a mean space? And it's like, because all the YA writers are on there, and they're stuck in high school. So they're stuck in that high school phase, whereas, we're just in the middle grade phase. But yeah, no, it's true. And even though I have written 2 books that are considered sort of, they're really just upper middle grade. And even the books that I do write, I would consider them a little bit, because of some of the issues that are in them, a little bit more of an upper middle grade. But yeah, you know what? I don't know. I'd love to write a YA. I'd love to write a YA mystery, an adult mystery. I just, don't know if when I, what I've been toying with, I don't know if that 12-year-old voice still keeps coming out,
It would be, I think it would be virtually impossible for me. My friend Beth is always saying, you need to write it, because I love cozy mysteries. Like a moment of silence for Jessica Fletcher.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Sad, but I just, that really sparked my love of cozy mysteries. And so I would love to be able to sit down and write a cozy mystery. But I just don't have that, I think too much like a middle school kid, like when I'm writing, my humor is just more, I'm so immature that I don't think I could do it. I sit at my computer and my stories aren't really spooky as much as they are, I feel like I try to lean towards like humor. And the only thing scary about my stories is when a joke falls flat.
That's true. It's like, it just is, again, the idea that horror as a genre is so rich because there's, horror that is humorous, and horror that's mysterious, and horror that's really dark, and horror that deals with real life issues. And, so again, I think that it is a richer area than most people think. They just think it's the 10,000 zombies, I will also give a nod to Angela Lansbury, and one of my favorite characters, who is a creepy character, but again brings that heart, is Mummy Fortuna. She was Mummy Fortuna in The Last Unicorn. And that is one of my, I love the wisdom and the creepiness about that character. And she knew her fate, but she took it anyway, like such an amazing character, like not good, some really not good parts about Mummy Fortuna, but Angela Lansbury played that character. And that is, I think I should start every conversation or every friendship with, wait, do you like The Last Unicorn? Because if the answer is no, my family tends to find it boring, but I love it. So yeah.
I don't even know how to tell you this. I've never heard of it.
The Last Unicorn. I love. Okay, now you have to watch The Last Unicorn.
I thought you were going to say
listen to the wisdom of The Last Unicorn. It is so.
All right. I'm going to check it out.
Spews such incredible wisdom, and so that's why it's one of those stories that I think you either like or you. Well, I'll be so curious. So we'll have to have an addendum to this.
I'll report back. You know what? I'll watch it this weekend. So I was going to watch a bunch of Murder, She Wrote, and then I was like, oh, but there's bed knobs and broomsticks. And, which is such a good movie.
Who doesn't love the flying bed? I love the flying bed.
Right? So that was probably, you're too young for that one, I think, because I remember going to the drive-in and seeing it when I was a kid. Kim, you're way too young for that. And I think I encourage you to go watch it because it's such a fun movie.
I am not too young, so.
I mean, it sounds familiar. I feel like maybe I saw it a long time ago. I don't know. I did used to watch Murder, She Wrote when I was a kid, so I should definitely go on and like have some more. I do love the mysteries, so that would be super fun. But
well, it was filmed in Mendocino, which is in Northern California. And that's like about 4 hours for me. And so, I'll go there every few years. And every time I'm there, I'm like, oh, let there be a murder. Let there be a murder, and I'm going to solve it.
Okay, so let's just say I love Murder, She Wrote, but how many murders can happen in one little town? You think there would be more?
There's a lot. I think people start getting suspicious, about her.
I loved her character because, again, she was that strong female, smart character, the writer, and the clues never got past her. But I have to say, I was also a huge Perry Mason fan and a huge Columbo fan. I love Columbo too. I know, but I loved him because he was so smart, but he never let on. He always played as though. So it's, again, that red herring, and also it's a spin on the mystery because Columbo, you knew from the onset who did it, and it was just about him having to prove that. So, and again, I like that because horror, again, I still feel that horror, and mystery do go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
So I guess we're learning about some of your inspirations now for these mysteries. Do you have any things that you think back to that we haven't talked about that you're like, these are kind of the inspirations for all of these like creepy, mysterious books that I'm writing nowadays?
So, can you say again?
Yeah. Do you have inspirations, like things from your like childhood or shows or books that you think kind of inspired your interest in the creepy and mysterious?
So yeah, like I was always a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. Even when I was in middle grade, I was reading Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm always sort of a little bit embarrassed to say that I was pretty much a reluctant reader growing up. And I say to people, if they don't know reluctant readers, they automatically assume a reluctant reader can't read or doesn't like to read, and neither one of those is necessarily true. A reluctant reader does like to read and can read, but doesn't like to read everything. So I was in a class, we had 18 girls and 9 boys. We were a little bit heavy on the girls' side. And everybody, all the girls and all the boys were reading Judy Blume. And they just love Judy Blume. And like Judy Blume is fantastic and amazing, has stood the test of time. And everybody loves Judy Blume. But I wasn't reading Judy Blume. I was reading Edgar Allan Poe because that's what was interesting to me. And the stories like The Telltale Heart really grabbed me because even today, it's still that question that lingers. Did it really happen? Did he really hear it? Or was it all in his mind? And again, that is something that was a huge inspiration to me as a writer. I want to write stories that are not 100% clear cut in the end. Now, they're not so foggy that people go, wait, what just happened? But give that last little turn of the screw. And I say turn of the screw too because I love Henry James, but all of those gothic stories. I read a lot of the classic gothic horror stories, and again, everything Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, but also love Shirley Jackson and Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, and always wondering, like H.P. Lovecraft does it a lot too, like wondering, is it in someone's mind or did it really happen? And so a lot of that inspired me as a kid. But of course, as authors, like we walk around and what inspires us, everything and anything. And for sure, this novel had a lot of inspirations from various things from Robert Frost's poem. And I think that everybody thinks that the poem's very, very clear cut, but a lot of people think it's not quite so clear cut. So I discussed that a little bit in the text as well. And then there's that wonderful, amazing novel by Natalie Babbitt, Tuck Everlasting. So again, you read a story like that and it just stays with you forever. But in your pondering and your wondering, you start to say, okay, but what if those same characters were in a really different situation? Would they make the same choices? And that was something that inspired me. And again, like all kinds of literature and, like crazy little doors and images of, frozen moose and all kinds of stuff like that go through my mind. And they all kind of hopefully come together in a semi-coherent story. But truthfully, I am very inspired by great works that have sort of lingered with me and left these lingering questions, and that I ponder to this day. I love a good story that has me still wondering what really happened, or what if the characters were slightly different, or what if. So I think that's in one of my biographies somewhere. Marina spent far too much time wondering what if, and probably should have been studying for her math tests a little bit more.
But those are our 2 favorite questions, right? So we love to ask those questions. And that's why I too love to put those magical supernatural elements, because they're really just questions that we can try to answer, and no person's going to answer them the same way. So it's always fun to address those. And it's always fun to hang out with you two. And thanks so much for joining us tonight. I guess we have the Halloween season coming up. Does anyone have anything fun planned for October? Any fun Halloween activities?
So my son's birthday is on Halloween. So it's always, Oliver. So it's funny because Halloween has always been clearly, my favorite season. And so it's generally, it's always for years, it's been us doing a Halloween party for Ollie. But this year we're going to hand out candy and try to scare kids. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. That's like my whole goal. I've seen kids go running down the street like, don't go to that house. Don't go to that house.
That's tough.
That's my goal. What about you, Marina? What are you going to do?
I actually have an aunt who's born also on Halloween. So that, yes, all those Halloween babies. Well, I have this year. It's on a Monday, so I get to celebrate. Well, I get to dress up. Let's just say not everybody celebrates at school, but I get to dress up and have some fun doing that during the day. And every time I say, oh, I want to go somewhere, I want to go wherever to a haunted place or a creepy place on Halloween, I just have to stay here and hand out candy. I just feel it's like it's something I have to do. So. My kids have kind of gotten past they're older for, no more sort of trick-or-treating for them. But yeah, I just love the whole atmosphere and walking around and definitely seeing all the kids come up with their costumes and everything. And I used to do a ghost cake every year and we decorate it with candy and stuff like that. So we have a few little traditions. But yeah, it's just fun.
What do you do, Em?
Oh, well, of course, lots of school visits this October, which is really fun. And actually, I started back part-time at the library this past week, and it's been about 5 years since I've been in library. So I'm really excited because I am working part of the day on Halloween, so I'll get to dress up. And I also volunteered to help out at a haunted house that they're putting on at another library. And that means I get to break out my creepy clown costume. So it's the same costume that I briefly wore when I worked at Fright Fest, which is like our big like haunted event that happens at our version of Six Flags here. So I was a creepy clown for that one. And so I still have the costume. So I'm probably going to tone it down a little bit, but I'm going to be like, I'll put a little bit less blood on it, but I'm going to be like a creepy clown again. So I'm really excited.
It's definitely on my list of things to do. We have a lot of creepy places here in the Toronto area, and one of them is Canada's Wonderland. And I have to tell you, because I have this pass, I've actually been to the haunt like 4 times already. There's a reason, because you can't go closer to Halloween because it just, it's
right.
But these amazing young people who are all dressed up and they stay in character, and it's just so fabulous. And I say to people, it's not, you see, this says a lot about what kind of a writer I am, because it's not the person that jumps out and goes, "Ooh, that scares me." It's the person that just stares at you, pulls you around, and just wanders, and you're like, ah! So, like, doesn't that say a lot? Like, I don't think I write to the boo effect, but I write to this.
Right.
That's fine.
She's that eye that's going to follow this.
I thought you were just creep off camera, Marina, because that would be creepy.
I'll bring up my creepy root
doll.
Oh,
right. We forgot to introduce the root doll.
Yes, Twiggy does have a starring role in Shadowgrave, and so I thought I actually have to make this doll. So there is a tutorial for any of you out there who would like to make this root doll, where you just simply pluck up a plant that with a root and tie a string to some more twigs and stick some eyes on, and there you have this creepy root doll. So it's quite easy, but you can find the instructions, I think, on my website, or TikTok or something like that. But yeah, make your, how about this? If you're looking for fun Halloween activities to do with your youngins, make a creepy root doll.
That's very cool.
Absolutely. Now we'll all have root dolls and just put them all over the house. Perfect. Well, I love it. And a huge thank you again to Lisa and, of course, our special guest, Marina Cohen, for joining us. And if you haven't already, definitely go grab a copy of Shadow Grave because you need to find out all of these secrets that are going on in Livermore and check out this extra creepy creature that is lurking in that over in that area. And we don't have, sometimes I play us out with music, but I don't have music today. So we're going to have to play us out with some like ghostly sounds or something. So give me your best like haunted house ghost impression.
Oh.